All right, so here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to be in Zechariah chapter 7, and it's a very interesting chapter. You're going to notice the pace is going to pick up a little bit. We got really, I'm not going to say bogged down, but we zeroed in on those 8 visions of Zechariah, and now we have Zechariah chapter 7. And this is 2 years after those visions. Okay, so let's listen a little bit to what Zechariah has to say here in chapter 7. In the 4th year of King Darius, the word of the Lord came to Zechariah on the 4th day of the 9th month, which is Chislev. Now the town of Bethel had sent Sherazir and Regemelech and their men to seek the favor of the Lord, speaking to the priests who belonged to the house of the Lord of hosts and to the prophets, saying, "Shall we weep in the 5th month and abstain, as I have done these many years?" Then the word of the Lord of hosts came to me, saying, "Say to all the people of the land and to the priests, when you fasted and mourned in the 5th and 7th months these 70 years, was it actually for me that you fasted? When you eat and drink, do you not eat for yourselves, and do you not drink for yourselves? Are not these the words which the Lord proclaimed by the former prophets when Jerusalem was inhabited and prosperous, along with its cities around it, and the Negev and the foothills were inhabited?" So let's just stop there. That's halfway through. There's 7 verses here, and then we're going to look at the next 7 verses. So what's going on? Okay, so they are in Jerusalem rebuilding the temple, and the town of Bethel sends an envoy to Jerusalem, and they have a question. Are we supposed to still fast on the 5th and 7th months? Now, apparently, when Jerusalem was attacked, defeated, and taken captive by Babylon for 70 years, the people instituted a fast in mourning, in memory of their lot with Babylon and Jerusalem. They had lost their city. They lost their temple, their kingdom. They lost everything. So the city was in mourning over those losses. But now they've returned to the land, and they're rebuilding the temple. And the question is, are we still going to do these fasts? Because those were fasts of mourning, but we have the temple here. This is what they're getting at. But what God says is that really what's going on here? Were you fasting for me, or were you fasting for yourself? So the point of the first part of this passage is, what are your motives in worship? So let's examine that. Let's take this opportunity to examine this for ourselves. So when we come to worship, where is our heart? Why do you go to church? Why do you pray? Why do you give money in your offerings? Why do you serve? That's an interesting question, isn't it? Why do you serve? I remember having a conversation with James Gray. Many of you know him. My first year at the church, I remember having this conversation with him. We had a couple that was trying to run the church, but they weren't saved. They were not a Christian saved couple, but they were running the church. And I was trying to bring the Holy Spirit into the church. I was trying to focus us on God and His gospel and the Word of God. Let's build some spirituality in this people, but we had secular direction from the top. But they were good servants of the church. So what was their motivation? They served well, but their motivation was glory and power. And I remember James Gray was having a problem in his church, and I remember I told him about my observations, and I said, power and servanthood look the same. but the heart is different. You see, you can serve, you can go to church, you can pray, you can serve in the church, you can give your money, but if those things are not done for the glory of God, if they're done to give you standing in the church and position, then that's not worship. That's just a power grab. When my tenure at the church in Atwater got to be its darkest moment, and some of you on here remember that. I had a couple of guys trying to push me out of the church. They were very active in the church. They were doing things, but they weren't doing them with the right heart. They were doing them to wrest the power away from the pastor. They wanted to run the church. And I saw one of those guys giving $50 bills to people in the church. Isn't that crazy? He was giving money away in church, but he was doing it to bring glory to himself, to say, okay, you're on my side, right? That's what can happen inside of a church. And this is what's going on. God is saying to the people of Bethel, what were your motives in doing those fasts? Were your motives in doing those to lead the people, to be leaders among the people? People aren't going to follow me unless I follow the rules. So I'm going to follow the rules, and the people will follow me, and I will have the power among the people. That's what was going on. When you fasted, was it really for me? Or were you doing that in the long run for you? And a lot of what we do in the church, if you think about it, is about us. Just had this conversation by email this morning with another pastor. He was at church on Sunday, didn't like the music. It didn't stir him. It didn't get him into worship. In fact, he has not liked the music at his church for a while now, and he has found himself teaching his Sunday school class and then being tempted to just go home. In fact, a lot of people do that in that church. They just go for Sunday school and then they skip the worship service because they don't like the music. So that's a pretty difficult situation, because the worship team is there to lead you into worship. But we don't all worship the same. Young people like a different type of music. That's what stirs up their soul to lead them into worship. Older people like hymns like I do, and that's what leads them into worship. And if you have a worship service that's just tuned into one group, the other group is going to be left out. So what do you do in that situation? So for me, I enjoy the music because it's pointing to God. It doesn't matter what style of music it is. You can play classical music with an orchestra. You can sing hymns with an organ or a piano. You can sing gospel music with a quartet. You can sing contemporary music with guitars and drums. I'm all in. I want to worship with you the way you worship. I don't want to tell everyone else, you've got to worship like me or I'm leaving. Because that's what's going on in that church, right? Where is the heart of worship there? Because the whole point of worship is to put ourselves behind, to lower ourselves, humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord, and he will exalt you. Humble yourself. Put yourself last. We just preached on this in Philippians. Let me read this passage in Philippians. Just happen to have that marked because that's where my sermon was from. Let's go to Philippians chapter 2, verse 2. Make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus. That's the model for worship. Consider everyone else more important than yourself. If I don't like the music, I'm not going to go home. I'm not going to take my Bible and go home. I'm going to go in there, and if people are enjoying themselves, I'm going to pray for them. That's worship. I pray for those people who are enjoying the worship, even though I'm not. Maybe I might go to the worship team and say, "Hey, I like I like what you're doing here, but you're kind of leaving me and my friends out. Could you work in a hymn or two for us?" When we were in Colorado, Brian Houston was the worship leader, and we did 30 minutes of music when we started. I mean, it was no like yesterday we sang 3 hymns. That took us maybe 10 minutes to sing 3 hymns. We did 30 minutes of music, and he always put a hymn into the set because I asked him. That meant something to me. I knew that hymn was there because I had said, could you just at least be kind to the old music? You know, remember what it was for and what it's about, and that some of us don't latch on to the younger stuff. We like the older stuff. And he did that. That's exactly how things should work in a church. I'm not going to go pout because of the music. I'm not going to make a scene. And they're not going to obstinately say, no, you do things our way or just don't do it at all. That's not what it's all about. So here we are in Zechariah chapter 7, and these people are coming and saying, shall we continue to weep and fast now that the temple is here? What do you think they were saying? Were they saying, we generally have this question, the temple is here. We should be happy now. Why are we weeping and mourning? Should we just not do this fast anymore? Or were they coming and saying, we really are tired of this weeping and fasting thing. Can we just get this over with now that the temple is here? It sounds to me like there might have been a little bit of that in there. I read the text with a little bit of optimism. I like to think that these were spiritual men saying, look, we have fasted for months and years, but the temple's here. Let's rejoice. Let's do something different. But that's not really what the text implies, because God told Zechariah to go confront them and say, who are you doing that for? Who is that all about? And if you are worshiping and God sends his prophet to say to you, who are you doing that for? That's not a good place to be. I'm just telling you, that's not a good thing when God comes to you and says, I'm questioning your motives. I think maybe your heart is in the wrong place, because your heart is supposed to be focused on God in worship. Let's read the last 7 verses. Then the word of the Lord came to Zechariah, saying, thus has the Lord of hosts said, dispense true justice and practice kindness and compassion each to his brother, and do not oppress the widow or the orphan, the stranger or the poor, and do not devise evil in your hearts against one another. But they refused to pay attention and turned a stubborn shoulder and stopped their ears from hearing. They made their hearts like flint so that they could not hear the law and the words which the Lord of hosts had sent by his Spirit through the former prophets. Therefore, great wrath came from the Lord of hosts. So he's calling out what they did before. Remember in the book of Isaiah in chapter 1, the very first chapter of the book of Isaiah, Isaiah writes, sons I have reared and brought up, but they have revolted against me. An ox knows its owner, and a donkey its master's manger, but Israel does not know. My people do not understand. Alas, sinful nation, people weighed down with iniquity, offspring of evildoers, sons who act corruptly. They have abandoned the Lord. They have despised the Holy One of Israel, and they have turned away from him. Where will you be stricken as you continue in your rebellion? The whole head is sick and the whole heart is faint. From the sole of the foot even to the head, there is nothing sound in it, only bruises, welts, and raw wounds, not pressed out or bandaged, nor softened with oil. Your land is desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. Your fields, strangers are devouring them in your presence. It is desolation as overthrown by strangers. What were they doing? They weren't worshiping with their hearts. That's what God says. He says, when you come before me, who requires of you this trampling of my courts? Bring your worthless offerings no longer. Your incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath, the calling of assemblies, I cannot endure iniquity and the solemn assembly. I hate your new moon festivals and your appointed feasts. They have become a burden to me, and I am weary of bearing them. So when you spread out your hands in prayer, I will hide my eyes from you. Yes, even though you multiply prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are covered with blood. When you come to worship God and your whole heart is not in it for God himself, your worship is defiled. God knows that. God knows the heart. Remember, God doesn't look at this. He doesn't see my face, my shoulders, my chest, my hair. He doesn't look at that. He's looking at my heart. And when I come to worship, he knows where my heart is. He knows what I'm thinking and what I'm doing. He knows if I'm being false in my worship. And there is nothing more abhorrent to God than false worship. He says in Zechariah chapter 7, they made their hearts like flint so that they could not hear the law of the words which the Lord of hosts had sent by his Spirit through the former prophets. Therefore, great wrath came from the Lord of hosts. And just as he called, and they would not listen, so they called, and I would not listen, said the Lord of hosts. But I scattered them with a storm wind among all the nations whom they have not known. Thus the land is desolated behind them, so that no one went back and forth, for they make the pleasant land desolate. False worship is an abomination to God. God doesn't hear our prayers when we're worshiping falsely. He doesn't hear our songs when we're singing instead of from the heart, from a place of selfishness. Zechariah forces us to ask some uncomfortable questions. When I pray, am I talking with God or am I just repeating words over and over? When I sing, am I worshiping or just simply reciting the lyrics that somebody has up on a screen or printed in a hymn book? When I give, am I honoring God or am I just satisfying my conscience because this is what I'm told to do, but I don't want to, but I'm going to have to give? And when I serve, am I seeking God's glory or my own recognition? Those are tough questions, but those are questions every one of us needs to ask. Where is your heart in your worship? Because it doesn't go well for those who worship with a false heart. God is not looking for people who go through the motions. He seeks those who worship from hearts that truly know and love him. That's the message of Zechariah chapter 7. So Skip will be here tomorrow night, and then we will come back here on Wednesday, and we're going to take a look at chapter 8. So I missed a lot of you guys. Steve, it was good to see you here tonight. Barbara, I missed you coming in. Michelle, missed you coming in. And it seems like there was somebody else. Who was that? Let's see. Judy Troxler, did I get you? I'm not sure. Donna Runner, there you are. I missed you, Donna. Sorry about that. All right, everybody, that's it for tonight. God bless each and every one of you, and we'll see you next time here on Digging Deeper Daily. God bless.